Nobody cares. Nobody has a problem with Mark Hamill. He doesn't get into character like that. He just does the
But
voice.
voice acting is different because voice acting is obviously you have to get into character, but there's a difference between getting into the character and getting into the character to the point where your facial expressions match, the look on your face.
That's true.
Like the articulation of your joints, like everything has to be appropriate when you're an actor.
That's true.
And also, a voice actor doesn't have to spend 8 hours on set with fucking makeup all over them and like fake blood on their face, doing a scene over and over again in the rain until they get like hypothermia.
That's true.
You know, there's just fucking aspects of real acting that people always, you're an actor, like don't pretend your life is so hard.
I am an actor, and I am an actor, and I'm gonna be an actor.
But I'm just a kid, and maybe I'll grow out of it. Ding. Okay.
One day I'll be an actor. If we were for never maturing, for never understanding or learning that every day. I just
Yeah. So are we restarting this, or are we just gonna keep going with it? Okay.
No.
Okay.
I think we should leave all of that in.
All of it.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, then in that case, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the third part of the 1984 discussion.
I'm excited.
I'm very excited as well, but I'm gonna start with a small recap just in case people have either
All week.
been a while. Well, it's been a week for you.
I've been thinking about
Really?
what's gonna happen. I've been telling
Nice.
people, I'm like, have you heard of 1984? It's fucking crazy.
It is fucking
Fucking
crazy.
rocket bombs,
Yeah.
telescreens.
So you got Winston Smith is a guy who lives in Airstrip 1, which is London. And he lives in a place which is under the control of a totalitarian government led by this sort of figure, this mysterious, mythical figure, Big Brother.
Yes.
And what we came up to at the end of our last session is that Winston was confronted by the thought police. And the owner of the store, Mr. Charrington, came in and sort of confronted him. So...
Didn't they take him out?
Well, so they punched Julia Winder and dragged her out of the room. But oddly enough, no violence actually befalls Winston.
Oh.
They just take him away.
Oh.
And this is almost
That's weird.
worse in some ways because he's more, like, you're more thinking about it. If you've ever seen the show Burn Notice,
Yeah.
whenever they interrogate people, the goal is not like, oh, let's just start torturing them.
Right.
The goal is always to make them wonder what you might do, because that's way worse. People are so much more creative in their own heads than you can actually be as, like,
Dude,
know,
I
an
use that
interrogator.
tactic all the time with people.
What?
Yeah. When somebody fucks up and does something really dumb,
Oh, yeah.
they apologize, and they expect me to say, what the fuck? But
Yeah.
instead I say, it's cool. Because
Yeah.
they know it's not cool. And I know that they're way more creative about how I feel about it than I am. And
Yeah.
I'd rather not think about
And
it.
it's more impactful. It's more
Plus,
impactful.
what are you going to say? I don't like that guy. He's always telling me it's okay when I fuck up. Like, what?
He's always forgiving me, that asshole.
Exactly. People will remember you lecturing them hardcore, but they won't remember, like,
And
oh,
vice versa.
I'm pretty sure he doesn't like me because he didn't. Look, what?
They're going to remember you lecturing them, not what you were lecturing them on.
Yep.
Very much the same way. If you don't lecture them at all, they're going to remember what they were supposed to get out of it.
Yes.
Like what they're supposed to know.
Yeah.
So they take Winston and they put him in a porcelain room. Which is, so imagine like...
Porcelain?
Yeah, so imagine a bathroom, essentially. But it's a cell.
So he just, like, sniffs his way out of it? He just brings his, like, his mortar and pestle, and he starts breaking up all of the porcelain, and he just, like...
I imagine there's concrete on the outside of the porcelain.
Oh.
It's like a porcelain lining the
Oh,
room. It's like a
okay.
bathroom, but it's a prison cell.
Mm.
So there's a bedpan and a bench, and that's it. And then porcelain everywhere else.
Oh.
So imagine how white and bright this room would be.
Yeah.
But there's no windows whatsoever. So he cannot see outside.
Yeah, why would you?
He's assumed it's been 24 to 36 hours, but he doesn't know. He has no actual reference.
Oh, yeah.
So he believes there might be some crumbs in his pocket, like breadcrumbs. So you have to imagine they live in a world, you know? They live in a world where food is so scarce that you probably, like, bring a piece of bread with you. And then,
He thinks that there's... Sorry, just 1 second. I just gotta test the thing. Is my mic working?
What? Hang on.
Is my mic working?
Yeah, you're
Okay.
fine, bro.
All right. I just backed up into
Paranoia.
I backed up into the cord, so, you know, shit happens.
Oh, okay. Okay, so,
But
yeah, so
it
he's
makes-
looking...
I just on the topic
yeah.
of not knowing how long it's been. There was a guy who did a show called World's Toughest Prisons, And probably the scariest one was the one, I think it was in Poland, designed to specifically to break up inner prison gang business, I guess. Because the difficulty with the prisons that they found was that inside prison was just a different world that was much smaller.
Yeah.
That you had the same gang warfare and the shit was still being done because you allowed them access to each other and access to the outside world. So people who fuck up or do, like, when they push against the guards, they put you in this straitjacket, put a giant padded helmet on you so you can't, like, bash yourself with it, and leave you in this room with no understanding of how much time has been in there. And the straitjacket is intended to be put on in an uncomfortable manner, like they're always putting pressure on you. The dude was in there for 20 minutes, couldn't understand how long he was in there for. He is actually almost crying. Like, he was emotional.
Holy shit.
20 minutes. He's like, I don't know if I was in there for 2 hours or like 24 hours. That was the worst experience. Like, he lived with he slept with 17 people in one area in Honduras that was intended for 7. There was like 21 people in there, and that was a much more pleasant experience because all the people were nice.
Yeah.
But being put in one room without an understanding of how long it was and being uncomfortable was an emotional experience for him.
So now imagine that even though he doesn't have, like, something over his head or a straitjacket, there's a telescreen watching him so he can't move. Right? So he has to just sit there on this bench. So he tries to fiddle for crumbs in his pocket, and the telescreen yells at him.
Oh.
So clearly he's being watched.
Very closely.
Yeah, he can't even put his hand in his pocket to try and find some crumbs.
Hands on the table, sir.
So he thinks 24 to 36 hours, but could be, like you said, it could be 2 hours.
Mm-hmm.
Could be a week. Well, no, because he'd be dead. He hasn't eaten, so he'd probably be dead.
He had crumbs.
So then they move him into another room where he's actually with common prisoners. So it's like a holding cell almost. So people are going in and out of this room who have... I wrote that the forced prison camps are like Prison Break Season 3. Because so these people start coming in and out who are going to or coming from forced labor camps.
Mm-hmm.
And apparently in forced labor camps, it's run by the prisoners of the camp. So it's essentially like Prison Break Season 3, where the guards really are just there to keep people from getting out. They're not there to police what happens inside the camp.
That's what they did in that Honduras prison.
Yeah.
I forget what they were called.
I did actually see that episode.
There was
but I remember that.
What was the name? They were called, like...
Yeah, they had special status, the ones that worked as guards.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't remember, but...
But even, like, the head guy, like, the top shit dude inside the prison, at the end of the night, he would get everybody in their cells, check through it, and then the real prison guards would come in, take him to his special, like, VIP... cell, and then lock him up at the end of the night and walk out, because that place is so dangerous that you can't put real prison guards in there on, like, normal populace.
And the crazy thing is when you watch season 3 of Prison Break, it's all, like, unregulated. Like, they just go to bed whenever they want and shit. But that makes more sense. It's run by the prisoners, but the prisoners answer to the guards.
Yeah.
Right? And I think that's probably what the forced labor camps are
Plus, like, in Mexico, prison guards, they carry fully automatic weapons.
Yeah. Well, some do here as well.
Really?
Yeah.
High, like, you're talking, like, high level, like, maximum security
prisons.
Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah. Well, you'd be surprised the things that are protected, like nuclear power plants will have automatically armed guards.
Yeah, I'll imagine. Yeah.
Which is
makes
just
sense.
And I know it makes sense, but you just imagine that, like, oh, there's a power plant around the corner. Like, let's go check it out. No, don't go check it out. Like,
dude, you can't even get close to the Hollywood sign.
guys with guns.
Not with
just come
guns,
out.
with microphones.
Get out! Get away from the Hollywood sign!
Joe Penna,
But apparently,
Mystery Guitar Man.
yeah,
He was, like, vlogging for Ray William Johnson one day.
Oh,
And
yeah,
they
I
were
remember
walking
that.
up the thing, and they're like, "We're gonna see how close we can get to it." And some dude just like, "Stand back from the sign."
And that'll scare the
And
shit
they're like,
out of
"Oh
you.
shit!" Like, they didn't even know where the speaker was.
And then they have a helicopter that will come and like nab you essentially too.
Really?
Yeah.
At the Hollywood sign?
Yeah.
Nab you like a net?
Yeah.
Goes down, like
the
grabs
claw
you.
from
The
that
claw.
machine.
Yeah, except this one's actually designed to grab things.
Yeah. So all these people coming in and out of the cell are all going to forced labor camps. And then this woman comes in, and she's like this huge woman, and she vomits next to him. And it's very unpleasant.
By huge, you mean like
Large lady.
large stature?
Yes.
As in like...
Well, everyone in this story is described as being these large grizzly bear type people.
Okay.
Because they're just so beat up that their bodies are very thick and tough, and their skin is like leather. They're not leather, but you know their fingers are huge
So, like,
and calloused.
Zarya?
Zarya.
From Overwatch?
I don't. Bad reference. I don't know Zarya, unfortunately.
We're talking like bulky Ronda Rousey?
No, we're talking like
fit or unfit?
like a bulky version of Brienne of Tarth from Game of Thrones. Like we're talking large people in general, because
It's generally big.
well, also
those ones
imagine
survive.
this is a world where the lowest people live with almost nothing.
Mm.
So all of the women are battle hardened by raising kids. They have no contraception whatsoever.
Oh,
Right? So you imagine a woman has kids when she's whatever, 17, 18
Right.
probably. Then she has like 5 or 6 of them. That takes 6 or 7 years to have them.
Yeah.
And then by the time they grow up and have kids, she's just taking care of grandkids now. Right? So they're just, all these people are just battle hardened.
yeah.
And he gets to thinking about the age of this woman, and he realizes that there's really nothing that says that this woman isn't his mother. There's no way that they would know, because she's been in a forced labor camp ever since he was a kid.
So what you mean is there's no evidence against it, so he's considering that she is.
Well, he's basically realizing that a woman of that age who's been in a forced labor camp for the last 30 years could very easily be his mom. And there's no way that you could tell, because A, there's no records, and B, even if there was like paternity tests you could take, they're both in prison. Right? So it was just a concept that he kind of came to, that, you know, this woman theoretically could be his mom, even though it's unlikely.
Feels more like a fan theory, but...
Well, he even said it.
Oh.
Like, yeah, he was like thinking about like the age of the woman and the fact that
Right.
that's what would have happened. And she wouldn't even know either. She wouldn't assume that her son is still alive out there. He was like 8 when she left. She'd assume he's dead.
She wouldn't, yeah.
Same way he assumes his mom's dead.
She'd probably recognize him.
No. Dude.
At 8?
From 8 years old to 39?
Yeah, man. There's things about a person.
Yeah, but you also have to imagine, she's lived in a forced labor camp.
That's true.
He's wearing blue coveralls, and he's been drinking gin and eating bread for 30 years. Like, they're both fucked up. Could also be his sister, too, right? Because his sister disappeared, and he never knew what happened.
Right.
So if, you know, like, there's a woman more around his age, could theoretically be his sister. But this other person comes in and, like, gets taken away to room 101. And it becomes this, like, mysterious, like, what is room 101?
No.
And I think the goal is of the guards is to build up room 101. Like, they want you to be afraid of it, even though you don't know what's actually there.
Like the factory from Colony.
Yes.
Everyone knows about everyone knows the name, the factory, and that you don't want to go there, but no one knows what it is.
What it actually is, and that's way more terrifying.
Oh yeah.
So there's this one quote that I had. So when he's sitting in the cell, he's distracted, but always distracted by the same thing. So he had only 6 thoughts: the pain in his belly, the piece of bread, or a piece of bread, the blood and the screaming, O'Brien, Julia, and the razor blade.
These are thoughts in his head?
These are the only 6 thoughts he has. So he's thinking about being hungry, he's thinking about food, the blood and the screaming, which is more of a what's going to happen, O'Brien, Julia, and then the razor blade that O'Brien talks about. Remember, he said occasionally we will be able to smuggle a razor blade into the cells of our people. Yeah, so now, see, he's only been there for whatever, a day, and he's already thinking about the elusive razor blade.
So the razor blade, was the intention behind that was to say for you to escape or for you to kill yourself?
To silence yourself.
Oh.
Yeah, when someone needs to be silenced. But what he doesn't understand is that Winston doesn't know anything he'd need to be silenced for anyways.
Right.
Right? Like, he's fresh to the Brotherhood. Why would they help him? He even said, you will get no help. Like, word for word, O'Brien told him, you will get no help.
Yeah.
But, your mind goes to wherever.
Right. Makes sense. If you have nothing to think about, then hope or despair is probably one of the two things, or maybe both at the same time.
Both, yeah, a mixture of them. So there's a man who comes in the room with whiskers, like he's just got a shabby beard,
Whiskers?
a whiskery beard.
Hello, I am prison guard Meow Meow.
And Winston describes him as the chinless man. So a chinless man comes in.
So he has a weak chin. That's what they call it.
Yeah, small chin.
You know what the bane of the weak chin individuals are?
A strong punch.
The profile shot.
Oh, because it shows off that they have no chin.
Yeah,
that's true.
IDubbbz represent.
Does he have no chin?
No, he's got a video about no chin
about
people.
Chinless people. So there's a chinless man, and then a man comes in whose head resembles a skull. Like, he's super thin.
Like Hugo Weaving when he plays Red Skull.
Yeah, like that. But that's what he's actually like. That's like what his body looks like. And so all of a sudden everyone kind of realizes that he's starving to death. And Winston hasn't been fed at all, right? So it's sort of implies, yeah, that this is what's coming. So the chinless man offers him a piece of bread, tries to give the super dying man a piece of bread. So the dying man sits on his own hands so that it won't seem like he's trying to accept it.
Oh.
So this
guy's figured it out.
Yeah, the telescreen tells the chinless man to drop the bread, and then he does, and then a guard comes in and just whacks him in the face with a trudgeon.
Oh.
Puts him on the bench and then just leaves. So he just gets brutalized, and then now there's a piece of bread just sitting in the middle of the floor. And everyone's just thinking about it, but they know if they get up to go get it, the same thing will happen.
Yeah.
Yeah, so now back to the whole telescreen terrifying world. Okay. Oh, I went past it. There we go. So this is the skull-headed man who's about to be taken away. So he gets told by the officer that he's being taken to room 101.
Oh, no.
And he says, "Do anything to me. You've been starving me for weeks. Finish it off and let me die. Shoot me, hang me, sentence me to 35 years. Is there someone else you want me to give away? Just say who it is and I'll tell you anything you want. I don't care who it is or what you do to them. I've got a wife and 3 children. The biggest of them isn't even 6 years old. You can take the whole lot of them and cut their throats in front of my eyes and I'll just stand by and watch. But not room 101.
Fuck.
Yeah. So...
I don't really feel bad about that guy anymore. I don't know,
but
sure you're building up the room, but to bring up fucking bring my kids over here. That's
but you'll
cool.
see, that's the whole point. That is what the Ministry of Love is all about. It's about breaking you down to the point where even your friends, your family, and your allies mean nothing to you if it means getting out of the Ministry of Love. Right? And you would rather die or do anything else, but they still don't tell you anything about room 101.
Wow.
Yeah. So that man gets taken away, and then O'Brien walks in, and Winston goes, "Oh no, they got you too." And he just kind of looks at him and he just goes, "Winston, they've always had me. You knew that." So O'Brien was never a member of the rebellion.
Oh no!
And this is the point. All along, I was thinking this was the Brotherhood testing Winston. At first, that's what I assumed it was.
So O'Brien is O'Brien goes out and pretends to be Brotherhood to get he entraps people essentially.
Essentially, yeah.
Huh.
Yeah, and so so he tells Winston this, and then someone comes in and just whacks Winston with a trudgeon, and he kind of passes out.
It's like their weapon of choice, the trudgeon.
Yeah, it seems to be. They like to beat people.
Oh yeah.
And then he talks about how when he's being beaten by the guards, that even though he's trying to, he's unable to lose consciousness. Which, he's hoping that he'll be able to, but he can't.
Right.
Because they're beating him, and that's one of his big failures.
Is not to pass out.
No, he's hoping to pass out because then he won't feel the beating anymore. But he can't because he's being beaten. So
but
obviously
they probably know how to knock somebody out Or they probably know how to not knock somebody out at this point, right?
Exactly. That's what they're trying to do.
Yeah.
And so they would give him breaks just long enough so that he didn't die from the beatings. Like, he would get breaks long enough that he could actually recover, and then he would go back to beatings.
What was that line from that James Bond movie? Not the world is not enough. Tomorrow never dies. And he says, "I have been learning to do this thing." It's he like rolls out all these. It's like an ancient art of like torture.
Yes,
And
I
he's
do
like,
remember that one.
The goal is to inflict the most amount of damage without letting them die.
You can go 12 hours without your kidneys.
Fuck.
4 hours without your heart.
Fuck.
Yeah, it was a good movie.
Yeah.
So after the beatings sort of slowed down, it led to really unusual interrogation techniques, like things designed to make it hard for him to keep a train of thought, like loud sounds and constantly like digging into what he was saying and trying to make him contradict himself, and just constant questioning by interrogators, like mixed in with beatings. And the idea at this point is they're just trying to just smash his brain apart, to the point where now he just confesses whatever they want. Like that,
right.
He aims to figure out what
It's
they want him
not
to
even
confess,
true, yeah.
and then confess it so that they'll stop. But that's not what they're really aiming for. So that continues, and then he remembers O'Brien telling him something in his sleep. Remember, we will meet in the place where there is no darkness?
Yeah.
O'Brien actually said that to him 7 years earlier. That wasn't a dream. That was
7 years earlier.
They've been tracking Winston for 7 years. They knew that he was going to go down the path of rebellion 7 years before the book started.
How?
They must have seen something. They must have, like some sort of unconscious tick or something he did. Because I don't know if it was 7 years ago, but that image that he found, the one that proved the government was lying,
Yeah.
that happened within the last 7 years, and they knew about that. So, yeah, so they've been watching Winston for a really long time. I guess waiting for the right time to finally nab him.
Which is weird.
And
they don't need evidence.
It sounds kind of, it sounds like, well, why didn't they just pick him up immediately?
Maybe because they knew he would gather a larger group, and then they would have more people to arrest.
I guess, yeah, because they arrested Julia, too. But he also probably did good work, right? At the Ministry of Truth, he did good work.
They were just keeping him,
probably,
as long as he was useful.
Yeah, because it sounded like he was good at what he did, so I imagine, that was definitely the case. Okay, so then they take him into a new type of interrogation room, and at this point, O'Brien becomes like his main interrogator. So they hook him up to this machine that they've developed, and they don't describe the machine really. They just talk about it in vagaries. Hang on, I've lost my page. Stop the presses. Okay, so there's this machine that they hook him up to, and he's completely immobilized. So like his hands, feet, neck, all that strapped down. And then O'Brien turns on this machine, and Winston says he did not know whether the thing was really happening or whether the effect was electrically produced, but his body was being wrenched out of shape. The joints were being slowly torn apart. Although the pain had brought the sweat out in his forehead, the worst of all was the fear that his backbone was about to snap. He set his teeth and breathed hard through his nose, trying to keep silent as long as possible. "You are afraid," said O'Brien, watching his face, "that in another moment something is going to break. Your essential fear is that it will be your backbone. You have vivid mental pictures of the vertebrae snapping apart and spinal fluid dripping out of them."
Fuck.
That is what you're thinking of, is it not, Winston? Winston did not answer. O'Brien drew back the lever of the dial, and the wave of pain receded almost as quickly as it had come. "That was 40, said O'Brien. "Out of 100.
Out of 100. Oh, so they've told them already they're going to do it 100 times?
No, that was 40%.
Oh.
That was like 40% power.
Oh, fuck.
Yeah, out of 100.
That's interesting. Have you ever done that before, whether you're like doing yoga, like by somebody, like over a voice thing, or someone on like a YouTube channel is like, close your eyes and do this thing, or whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
Have you ever done that and like imagined and like went fully into what they were
Like
telling you.
guided meditation almost.
Or even a hypnotist.
I've never really done a hypnotist, no.
Surprisingly effective. That like when somebody tells you to imagine something, or even they say it like it's fact, like you are now floating on this. Like if you get into it, it's amazing how much you can do with your own mind.
Yeah.
And if you're just stuck in that, it would be very difficult
To get out of it.
to fight it, because like reality is like
Reality is what you believe it to be.
it's your one window into the world. So if someone controls what happens in front of that window, then your reality slowly changes, and eventually you forget.
Yeah.
Like we were just doing it today. We were going through our old YouTube videos. That was 2 years ago, and it feels like a lifetime. And
long lifetime.
And that's with access to it. How long would you think it would have taken us to remember every one of those videos if we had no access to the channel?
We'd forget them.
We would.
Yeah, so they're working off very little.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so he starts to talk to Winston about Winston's own mind, and he says that your adherence to what you believe to be truth is not a virtue, it's actually a disease that you have. That's why he's the lone person. He's the only person infected with the disease of believing that there is an absolute truth. Everyone else...
We're just living in it.
Yeah, exactly. Everyone else understands that the world is what we decide it is. In this society.
You believe in reality as being...
Yeah. So Winston is actually sick.
Mm.
Yeah.
Which I suppose makes sense. This is people you meet, and you're like, no. Nobody else is wrong. It's you. It's the rest of the world, not you. Everyone's wrong. You're always right. That's essentially what he's doing. Is like, look, Winston, look how everyone else just obeys
Gets along.
and doesn't pay attention to anything happening around them. That's because they're not ill.
In some ways, these scenes with O'Brien remind me of that one scene in the first Matrix movie when Smith pulls the earpiece out of his ear and he comes close to Morpheus and he says, I need to get out of here. I can taste the stink off you. And he's like pushing his head back.
Yeah.
That's what all these scenes remind me of. I imagine O'Brien's face as being like inches away from Winston's face, and Winston's like strapped down to a table. That's how all these scenes present themselves to me.
I gotta watch The Matrix again.
Yeah, they're great films.
We gave birth to AI.
So O'Brien tells him that the past only exists in our collective memory, which is true in a lot of ways. But then what Winston says is, you have not controlled mine. You haven't controlled my memory. So he's still holding to the idea that the only land that is your own is within your own head. Like he still believes that. He's still holding on to that idea. And we're 260 pages into a 300-page book. So he's rigid with that idea. He's holding on hard.
Yeah.
And O'Brien tells him that it is only possible to actually see reality by looking through the eyes of the party, because the party generates reality now.
Right.
At least in this world, that is true. That you have to look through the eyes of the party to see what is quote unquote reality. So this is where it all becomes very confusing, because the whole doublespeak thing and people like unconsciously knowing shit. And there's a lot of lunatics in this story.
Right.
O'Brien is a lunatic by our definition, but to him, Winston is actually the lunatic. And he keeps telling Winston, he says, it is hard, but eventually you will become sane. That's what he keeps telling him. He keeps telling him he's insane.
So we're going to fix you.
Yeah, this whole process is to make him sane, to heal him. So everything is blurry, and then it gets even blurrier. So he does the 2 + 2 = 5 test. I guess that's what I'm going to call it.
Oh.
You've heard that before?
I have.
The 2 + 2 = 5.
I heard. I was actually going to bring it up earlier, and I thought I'll just leave it. But yeah, no, I've in elementary school, a kid read a book where he said that they did this.
Interesting. So 2 + 2 = 5. You read it and you know that that's wrong. But the whole point of this scene is that it's proving that 2 plus 2 only equals 4 because that's what we decided that it equals.
Right. That's
Right.
we've assigned those numbers. Those.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what O'Brien even says is that 2 plus 2 can equal 3 or 5 if we choose it to, but 2 plus 2 will equal 4 when we find it convenient to do so, like in math and science.
All right.
Yeah.
It sounds
There's
like
where doublethink comes
it's
in.
an unnecessary philosophical statement that leaves out practicality. It's like a theoretical thing.
What? 2 plus 2 equals 5?
He says that it only equals 4 when it's convenient, when reality states that it's always going to be 4 regardless of what we call it.
Well, that's where doublethink comes in, right?
Right.
That's why Newspeak exists, because Newspeak is the most effective way to allow their citizens to internalize all this nonsense.
The philosophical thing I find interesting, because I heard there's a Batman quote. He says he disagrees with killing, even when they're a killer. He says, if you kill a killer, the number of killers in the world remains the same. And it's like, whoa, that's fucking philosophical there, Batman. What happens if you kill 2 killers?
Or 3 or 4.
As soon
or
as you kill 2,
1,000.
there's one less killer, even if you become the killer of the first killer.
Yeah.
And it's like, sure, the first one's very philosophical, especially when Batman says it. It's like, ooh. But he's really not thinking past that one moment. Only the first time does the number of killers remain the same.
It's true, but you become a more egregious killer every time.
Maybe.
Right?
Unless it's like a collateral.
A collateral.
Like, what if you line up
I've already
5...
killed one.
What if you line up 5 killers?
And shoot him with one bullet?
1 bullet. Then the number
Still.
of killers is down by 4, and you only pull 1 trigger.
Yeah, but think about it this way. If you drive your car off the road and hit one person, that's 1 manslaughter.
Right.
But if you drive your car off the road and hit a family of
Right.
people, that's 4 or 5 counts of manslaughter.
Sure.
Just because it's one stroke of the knife doesn't mean that you get absolved. Well, after the bullet traveled through the first head, I was already a murderer, so I mean the rest of them are just
Hey.
murder by proxy.
I didn't kill anyone. The bullet did.
Yeah. The bullet killed all 5 of those guys, so you'd better put that bastard away.
Hey, what
for a
happens
long
after I
time.
pull the trigger is not my business.
I'm a trigger man, not a cleanup man. So the whole experiment with 2 plus 2 equals 5 ends with Winston being so delirious that he can't even tell how many fingers there are. They're just a blur. He doesn't even see 4, he just sees all the fingers. So for him to say 2 plus 2 equals 5, or that there are 5 fingers in front of him, is just as fair as for him to say that it's 4.
Right.
Because he doesn't know either. And that's part of the whole example of how what you understand and what is true are not always the same thing, and sometimes one isn't even relevant. Sometimes what's real isn't even relevant, at least in this society. So they go back to the idea that even though O'Brien is like torturing him, he's still the only person that Winston can actually talk to.
Yeah.
Especially now that he's captured, because he can say whatever he wants now, right? He doesn't have to hide anymore, because what are they going to do to him? Torture him?
Right.
Right? So, at the same time, he has to maintain a certain level of intelligence, or O'Brien will torture him.
Mm-hmm.
So there is that, but O'Brien tells him about why the party does what it does and why they've invested so much time into Winston. So he says that they're not interested in the act of the crime, but in the thought that preceded it, in the thought that generated the act of crime.
Right, because they understand that actions are much more powerful. Or sorry,
thoughts are much more powerful.
They create a lot of actions.
Exactly. Whereas actions are powerful in that they attain real results, but they're not repeatable. An action doesn't necessarily lead to another action, whereas a thought will. So he says, unlike the Inquisition or the totalitarians of the past, the party wants to convert all heretics to the party before they kill them. Because then that way nobody dies a heretic. Nobody ends their life hating the party. They all end their life either loving the party or having like no objections to the party.
Right.
So you don't have the same like William Wallace style like dying for your cause.
That's like the Purge. How like ever since the Purge started, poverty is down because all the poor people died.
Dead. Yeah.
But you don't put that part in. You just say, look,
less poverty.
Unemployment is down.
Yeah,
while violent criminals are also dead.
Yeah,
what a coincidence.
That's a dark one.
Yeah, it's very dark.
And he talks about how now that Winston has entered this process, Winston will be just totally lifted from time and will just be gone. I think I've talked about that before.
Vaporized.
Essentially. And he says no one is ever spared once they have strayed once. That is another thing the party does to remain in power.
So they don't let you have a second chance.
There's no forgiveness. He says, we hollow you out of all of your human emotions and we replace it with the party. So you become a shell of a person. And he even talks about how Winston's mind resembles his own, and I think that's part of why Winston gets along with O'Brien so well.
Yeah.
Even though they're like torturee. It's like kind of a strange relationship. And then he says, I'll answer your questions now. O'Brien says, if you have questions for me, you can ask them. But you have to be very specific about your questions.
Wait, great. Turn that one around.
Yeah. So Winston says, does Big Brother exist? And he pretty much gives him a what does it mean to exist answer. So he says, does he exist in the way that you and I exist? And O'Brien says, you do not exist. That's what he says to Winston. Because Winston doesn't exist anymore. No one will ever know of his whereabouts. No one, other than those who remember him directly, will have any sort of idea that he was there. So Winston doesn't even exist anymore. Big Brother has more of a right to be considered existing in this world than Winston does. Because Big Brother is in the newspaper every day. Winston is a nameless prisoner who does not exist. And then he says, what is Room 101? And O'Brien says, you and everyone already know what Room 101 is. And no, he's not in Room 101, not at this point. So he essentially gives him some really vague and unhelpful answers. But he does allow him to ask the questions. So this whole process, this reintegration, this interrogation that he's in, is supposedly supposed to have 3 phases. So the first phase is learning, the second phase is understanding, and the third phase is accepting. So in phase 1, you have to learn all the party things. In phase 2, you have to grow to understand why. And then in phase 3, you have to accept them.
Oh.
Those are the main 3 phases in the process of integrating a heretic. So I think he's in learning at this point, but then he moves to understanding. So learning was him learning why this has happened to him and what it's going to mean and all that. And then understanding is more where he tries to, I guess, wrap his head around it. Like, what's the point? Because he's read the book, but he actually finds out that O'Brien collaborated in writing the book. So he was kind of just being sold up Schitt's Creek from the beginning.
Right.
But the book was still really interesting and insightful. And he says that the story is true, even though we've talked about this. There's no way to know that that's true. Like, there could be a North Korea type situation.
Right.
No one really knows. And he talked about how the method of revolt that's talked about in the book, where all the proletarians rise up, is just impractical, because how could they ever organize themselves?
Right.
They have nothing to work off of. They have no way that they could become one mass. They're individuals, and that's what keeps them down.
Oh.
Right? So he talks about how even though the book is real, some of the theories and the concepts are not. Some of the concepts are not applicable.
So it's not intended to be fully taken literally. It's more of a concept.
Yeah, and I don't even, again, understand why they do it, because some things don't even really make sense. Like, why do they spend all this effort just to capture these people?
Right.
But I think part of the writing the book is that it legitimizes people being parts of the Brotherhood, and it reinforces the people who are in the Brotherhood before they get captured, right? Because you read it and you're like, oh, here are all these ideas, that like I knew about. And I think they use the book so that people read it and get the ideas in their heads, and then when they're captured, they build off those ideas to make them a party member.
Oh.
I think it's like supposed to be sneaky.
Yeah.
It is, and it is pretty sneaky. So the party wants power for the sake of power. He says power is not a means, power is an end. So
an end.
That's it. Power is the end goal. Power is not a
Oh,
means to
oh.
achieve something. It is
Oh,
the
it's-
end goal
it's
you're
what he's
working
after.
towards.
Right.
Yes.
Okay.
And what they're all after. That's what the party in general is after. Yeah. And it's weird because the power for power's sake to me doesn't make any sense,
Yeah.
right? Because what would you want power for if it's the same as having money without time to spend it?
Right.
But to them, that is the goal. And so that is why they're immortal, is because
There's no end goal for them.
they don't want to make a bunch of money. They don't want to, put people in certain positions. They just want power. So they
Yeah.
will retain that power for as long as they can. And this is the point where Winston starts to realize that he can't fight O'Brien because O'Brien is essentially a lunatic, but he's so persistent in his lunacy that you can't shake him of it. So any argument Winston uses is just essentially useless because he just persists in being a lunatic.
Right.
And nothing ever gets done.
That's probably why he's the interrogator.
Exactly, because he's probably king shit lunatic.
Yeah.
Right? So it's like really hard to fight back against that. So he talks about how 1976, I think, there was like an attempt at a revolution, but it never went anywhere because they don't have any sort of a way to sustain it. Like you can build a movement, but once it's crushed, it's crushed.
Yeah.
There's no way for it to remain. And then Winston's all along been noticing that O'Brien's face is really heavily weathered. He's beat up. He looks old. And O'Brien says to Winston, so you're wondering, if I can't control my own aging, how can I control reality? And he said, I don't matter. The party is what matters. I'm a single cell in the organism of the party. And cells have to die all the time.
Oh, and then new ones take their place, maintaining the
Performing
same
function.
organism. Yeah.
Exactly.
Interesting.
Sometimes even functioning better than new cells.
Probably will.
Right? So it's very unique because he has actually fully given himself up to the party. He has become a part of it in the sense that he knows that he is a cog which will break and be replaced. And that sort of robs Winston of the power that he believes he has because he thinks he's sort of caught O'Brien on something.
Yeah, and now O'Brien is telling him, "Was like, look, buddy, even if you win with me, I'm the smallest piece of the biggest puzzle that you could possibly imagine. Like you can't even conquer me, and I'm not even important."
Mm-hmm.
Essentially saying, like, isn't it like you could spend your whole fucking life trying to climb this wall, but there's 18 more, and they're all bigger than this one.
Yeah, so it won't do anything.
Yeah.
And he goes to prove that the party can manipulate physics if they want, because if everyone believes that they're traveling through time, then they are. Right? Theoretically. So he talks about how nothing is really beyond the reach of the party because they can warp reality by warping what's in people's heads.
Makes sense.
And by controlling media. And I think the reason that they base their whole society off of hatred and pain and war is because it's way easier to control those emotions than it is love and compassion and friendship.
Yes.
Right? And it's also easier to direct hate than
especially
it is
fear.
love.
Fear is very easy.
Fear is very easy. Yeah.
Direct. Yeah.
Exactly.
You don't even have to try with that one.
With fear?
Yeah.
Well, you still have to try. All you gotta do.
You can put an idea out there, like you can tell kids that if they're not careful, the Loch Ness monster will eat them, and they can carry that with them far beyond the story you ever tell.
That's a good point. And you don't really have to do much. You just tell them the story.
Oh yeah, and they're in every society. The chupacabra.
Chupacabra. So he taught. This is how dehumanized the society is. We have cut the links between parent and child, and between man, and between man and woman. No one dares trust a wife or a child or a friend any longer. But in the future there will be no wives and no friends. Children will be taken from their mothers at birth as one takes eggs from a hen. The sex instinct will be eradicated. Procreation will be an annual formality, like the renewal of a ration card. We shall abolish the orgasm. Our neurologists are at work upon it right now.
Oh my god.
There will be no loyalty except loyalty to the party. There will be no love except the love of Big Brother. There will be no laughter except for the laugh of triumph over a defeated enemy. there will be no art, no literature, no science. We are omnipotent. When we are omnipotent, we shall have no more need of science. There will be no distinction between beauty and ugliness. There will be no curiosity, no enjoyment of the process of life. All competing pleasures will be destroyed. But always, do not forget this, Winston. Always there will be the intoxication of power, constantly increasing and constantly growing subtler. Always, at every moment, there will be the thrill of victory, the sensation of trampling on an enemy who is helpless. If you want a picture of the future, imagine a boot stamping on the human face forever.
So they want to turn people into crocodiles.
Essentially.
Just like, it's just eat, fuck, survive. And none of that is for any reason but because you've been doing it.
I don't know why. That's the one thing that makes no sense about this whole story is why. But I think O'Brien really puts it best. Power is so intoxicating. It's the same way someone will smoke meth until their body gives out on them. Power is so intoxicating that even if the cost is turning humans into wretched monsters, it's worth it to have that power over the other people.
I guess giving up power is difficult.
But I just think it's really crazy how he says, if you want a picture of the future, imagine a boot stamping on a human face forever. Doesn't that just sound dark and grotesque?
It's very dark.
That's what I don't understand. Like, why would you want to be a member of that? And I suppose the goal is to be the inner party where they live in luxury, right? Relative luxury, but still.
I guess if you feel like it's never going to change, the best place to be is
in the top
with them, yeah.
And that's the shitty thing. It's that mentality that keeps it going, right? That's the mentality that keeps everything going. If you can't beat them, join them. But really, if everyone tried to beat them, you could.
Yep.
And that's the hard part to point out. So he, at this point, lets Winston see what his body looks like because he's been there for God knows how long. He looks gray, hunched over. His body's wasting away. He's losing his hair. He's basically a skeleton.
Fuck.
And then O'Brien even, like, he's pointing out to him how much his body's falling apart. He pulls, like, some of his hair out and it just comes off like a dog. That's like,
How does that happen? Stress?
It's just lack of nutrients. No nutrients to form new hair, no nutrients to, like, treat the skin or just anything. And he even pulls one of his teeth out because it just comes out.
Fuck.
Yeah, so he's just falling apart at this point. And there's so many interactions that he has with O'Brien that I really love. And this is probably one of my favorite lines in the whole book. "Tell me," said Winston, "how soon will they shoot me?" "It might be a long time," said O'Brien. "You are a very difficult case. But don't give up hope. Everyone is cured sooner or later. In the end, we shall shoot you." Yeah. These are the conversations that they have.
Wow.
Imagine having a conversation with someone you know you're going to kill, or a conversation with someone you know is going to kill you. And for weeks at a time, like, day after day, having these conversations. And then when someone says something like that to you, don't worry. Eventually you'll be all right.
And you're excited.
One day we'll shoot you.
Yeah.
Like, that's crazy. Then they start to treat him well because now he's really finished his knowledge phase and he's truly starting to enter the understanding phase. So they start feeding him food. They give him cigarettes. He starts dreaming of things. Well, he's always dreamed of things, but now he has daydreams because he's essentially still in isolation. He's just in a cell. He's given 3 meals a day, so he uses that to kind of figure out how long it's been. And then his body starts to return. He eventually starts doing remedial exercise, like he can do some push-ups, and stuff like that. So his body's starting to return, and then as his body comes back, his mind starts to return to him.
Yeah.
And so at this point, he doesn't really have any comparison for anything, and his world is kind of static. He gets food, and then he rests, and just lies around a lot. But then after a while, they give him a slate to write on, like a board and a chalk to write on.
This is the intention here is that they've broken him down and now they're building him back up?
Yeah, that's kind of the idea, that they've already shattered him now, and now it's more of a matter of him building himself back up. Because it's hard to build someone back up all on your own. Like, you have to allow them to do part of that.
Plus doing all of that and then following it up by being kind of nice would actually start to make him feel like they're somehow helping him out.
Accepting, yeah. He's like joining them in a way, unconsciously. So he begins to write things like he'll write 2 + 2 = 5, or he'll write freedom is slavery. So he starts writing these things out because writing them helps get it into his head. And he starts teaching himself. He starts self-imposing the party doctrine on himself. I have soap bubble example written down. Don't know what that means.
Soap bubble example.
I think is self-imposing party doctrine.
Soap bubble, self-imposing.
No, that's not what I meant.
It sounds like an acronym. Self-imposing party doctrine.
Sip bubble. So he says that stupidity is as necessary as intelligence when adhering to party doctrine, and it is just as difficult to attain the level of stupidity that is required to be a party member. So in order to use doublethink, you have to be smart enough to apply the term, but dumb enough to forget all the things you need to forget.
Right.
So you need to simultaneously be very intelligent and very unintelligent and very uninterested in examining the facts.
Right.
Which is weird because this is like just pointing out how much of a lunatic society this is.
Yeah.
Right? You need to be stupid and ignorant, and you need to be a slave to survive in this society the way it's set up. So he starts to ponder his death because he knows it's coming at some point. And he starts to associate his death with bliss. He starts to associate his death with being a good thing.
Right, an end to the suffering.
An end to the suffering, yeah. And he starts talking about how they always shoot you from behind. I don't know why he assumes that, but that's his assumption, is that he's just going to be walking down a hallway one day and then he'll just get shot in the head and he won't even know what happened, and that'll be it all. So that's what he keeps hoping for every time he's walking down the hallway. He's just waiting for the bullet.
Yeah.
Right? And that becomes like his main thing. And then one day during a hallucination, he screams out Julia's name. He yells out her name.
Oh, no.
And
they figured it out.
Yeah, so he had hoped that he could become a member of the party without actually letting go of the feelings he had from before.
Right.
But then he starts to hear the sound of boots outside the door, and they come and they drag him away. And they march him off to room 101.
Oh, no.
The infamous room 101.
Mike Wazowski, welcome to room 101. You forgot to file your paperwork.
You need your 101 form. You need your access code. So he says that for him, freedom is dying with hatred of the party in your heart. That's his goal, is to die hating them still. That would be the freedom. That's his goal out of all of this, all this torture, is to hold on to his hatred, no matter what.
Kind of like the whole Spartacus thing. Like, he never intended to survive.
Yeah,
the point was to fuck with the Romans as long as possible.
Yeah, it's true. He didn't want to live happily ever after.
No.
So they take him to room 101. And room 101, O'Brien explains to him, is the worst thing in the world. So for some people, it's drowning. For some people, it's fire. For other people, it's different. For Winston, it's rats.
Oh.
Rats are his big thing.
Oh, so they just take whatever they figured out what you feared the most.
And that's room 101. That's why everyone knows what it is, because everyone knows what their own worst fear is. Oh. Yeah. So they take him into room 101, and they bring in this cage that has essentially 3 sections to it. So the one section holds 2 rats apart, and then the other section connects to a mask, which they would put on a person's face.
Ooh.
And then there's 2 cages. The one cage separates and allows the rats to get at each other, and then the other cage separates and allows the rat to get at the person's face.
Oh.
In this cage. So there's these 2 rats that are just like bouncing around in these cages and like piranhas that haven't been fed.
Right.
And so Brian comes and he puts it down on a table, this like cage, and he starts talking to him. And he starts talking about how rats are actually carnivorous creatures.
Yeah.
And he starts talking about how sometimes they'll like go for the cheeks and work their way in that way. Other times they'll go straight for the eyes. And he just starts describing like the reality of it to Winston, who's obviously freaking out.
Yeah.
And as he's bringing the cage up towards Winston's face, Winston can feel himself getting miles and miles away, but obviously still right there in the room.
Yeah.
And
holy fuck.
so he comes to the realization that the same that guy did in the cell earlier, that the only person that he can put in his place between him and the rats is Julia.
Oh no.
Right? Because it's the one person he still cares about. So that's what he does. He basically just shouts like, don't do it to me, do it to Julia. Like if you have to do it to someone, do it to her. So that's
oh my god.
That's him giving up, right? He finally gave up, and that was the whole point of Room 101, is to like break down the final cubes, the little crumbs of hatred.
So it's just a white room with a chair and a table.
Essentially, yeah. Just another ominous room in the place where there is no darkness.
Oh.
So flash forward, Winston's no longer in the Ministry of Love.
Oh.
So Winston is now like those three guys whom he found the picture of. He just sort of wallows. He drinks a lot of gin. He just hangs out at this one cafe all the time.
So he got out.
They released him. Once they broke him, they released him back into the world so that the world could see that he was a party man.
Oh no.
Before they kill him.
Oh shit.
That's always the goal, is that they want the people to return to society broken down. So that society doesn't see them dying as heretics. Society sees them dying as broken men.
Broken, yeah.
So they give him a job. They give him some really high-paying bullshit job, which is referred to as a sinecure.
A sinecure?
Yeah, that's actually a term for a position that sounds really good, but is kind of bullshit.
Oh, okay.
You know, so that's the job that they would give to someone who once was a really well-respected ex, but now can no longer serve that function. So we give him a sinecure. It pays him money, keeps him occupied. You know, like a rich kid, if you gave him a job just so that he wasn't like always out screwing around and making the tabloids.
Right.
That's the kind of job that they gave him. They don't really do much. They just prepare memos. They barely meet. And sometimes when they meet, they just argue like for the sake of arguing. So there's just a bunch of people like him who have all been like, you know, whitewashed by this process. So he spends all his days at the Chestnut Tree Cafe, which is just this little bar, essentially. And he plays chess against the newspapers. So, like, the newspaper each day, it shows, like, a chess setup, and you set it up like that, and then the goal is to try to finish the game in as little moves as possible. So he just spends his time doing that. He doesn't even have to order drinks. They just bring him a new bottle of gin when they see his is getting low. And so one day he actually sees Julia, who has also been released.
Shit.
So he catches up to her, and
he's like, "Hey, how was the rat cage?"
Yeah, how was like all your torture? And so he talks to her, and she says, "I gave you up." And he says, "Yeah, I gave you up too."
Ha.
Right? Because like they.
Oh, it's like if you like pina coladas.
What?
You know the song, right?
Yeah.
I'm getting caught in the raid. It's a song about a guy who wants to have an affair, and so he puts an ad out that says, "If you like pina coladas and getting caught in the rain," and all the other whole like the chorus, right? Then meet me. So he goes to cheat on his wife, and his wife shows up.
So cheat on him.
To cheat on him.
That would be so hilarious.
So it's this like unconventional.
Is that what that song's about?
Yeah, it's a beautiful unconventional song about how two people had to want to not be together to truly discover each other.
Yeah, to
But
find
it
out.
turns out the people that we want to be with the most is each other, but we needed to make that decision in order to get to arrive at that conclusion. It's a fucking beautiful song.
Crazy. Okay,
Yeah.
but that is kind of what it's like. And they talk a little bit. It's very uncomfortable. She doesn't really want to talk to him as much as he wants to talk to her. And she says something about them talking somewhere warmer because it's like winter when he finds her.
Right.
He starts following her, and then after a while, he just kind of loses the energy and just kind of turns around. Well, because he realizes he was following her away from his cafe, and he didn't even know what they were supposed to be. Like, he didn't know what he wanted to talk to her about. So after a while, he just realized, like, they're just, someone that they used to know. So he gives up on that, and he just goes back to the chestnut tree. And he's sitting there.
It was the time I gave you up.
I went back to the chestnut tree.
They had a rat in a cage, and it was really freaky.
They gave me so much gin. So he goes back there, and he is aware that there's supposed to be an announcement later in the day. And it's... So Oceania owns the southern tip of Africa.
The southern tip of Africa.
Yeah, so
it's
South
like,
Africa.
That's kind of like the States owns Alaska.
A little, yeah. It's like this one weird just hub that they have.
Yeah.
And so apparently troops have been coming down from the Congo. Do you know where that is? It's like smack dab in the center.
Oh, right.
And it's this huge jungle. Anyways, troops of a opposing force were coming down from the Congo towards South Africa. And like he was waiting for the announcement of what occurred. And everyone was either assuming that force was going to come down and pinch them off and push them like out, or another like force from the party was going to swoop around and flank them and cut them off.
Is it the southern tip or the northern tip?
Southern.
But aren't they so they're up here.
Yeah, so
they're up in England.
North America and South America.
Yeah.
Europe, just the United Kingdoms, and Southern Africa. Those are the components that make up Oceania. Yeah, so there's these...
I guess because all of them have connections to the ocean? Is that why they called it that?
Probably. Well, no, that's probably why it was established that way. Like, likely Oceania began in Britain.
Yeah.
And Britain had the strongest navy ever.
Yeah, they did.
Right?
Well,
and
didn't France have the strongest at one point? Or was it always...
I don't think so, man.
No? It was the
Maybe,
British?
But I'm pretty sure it was the British. Because the British dominated the shit out of the 1700s wars.
They were
because of their navy.
They were the Greyjoys.
They were the Iron Islands.
Yeah.
And they're islands, right? The British Isles.
We do not so.
So he's waiting to hear about this announcement. And he's thinking about this peaceful afternoon of playing Snakes and Ladders with his mom. And it's like the chocolate memory, but it's not as horrifying. He remembers it being like the only happy memory with his mom. She brought home Snakes and Ladders, just an old wooden board set.
I love Snakes and Ladders.
I actually have a wooden set.
Solid.
We should play it, do like a table flip thing. And he's remembering this, and then the thing chimes in. The victory bells chime in over the telescreen. And it announces that there was this major victory in Africa, and that the force that was coming down towards South Africa was cut off and flanked. And that it was like this huge turning point, and that the war may be on its way to being over. And at this point, Winston, he's thinking about all the things that are going to happen in his life, and he's thinking about the ever-awaited bullet.
Yeah.
Because at this point, he still longs for that bullet because he knows that his death is imminent.
Yeah.
Right? So he in some ways, would rather all of this sitting around drinking gin and playing chess to be over. But he still, when this announcement comes on, he says, but it was all right. Everything was all right. The struggle was finished. He had won the victory over himself. He loved Big Brother.
Oh, fuck.
The end.
That's the end of the book?
It's the last line in the book.
What?
So it's really a story of Winston winning the victory over himself.
By just giving up?
Well, he didn't really give... It wasn't a choice. That's what the party does. Winston is not a special character. Winston is just one of the characters.
Oh no.
Like you always you look at Winston with this lens that he is the one that's going to break the mold. He's the one that's going to shatter the party
Because he's the protagonist of the story.
But the real idea of the story is to show that 99% of people are the faceless masses that get churned out by the machine. And that's what Winston Smith is. He is actually one of the original anti-heroes. And when I say original, I mean of modern literature, obviously. Like, if you go back to prehistoric literature, there's anti-heroes.
Right.
But he was one of the first hugely iconic ones, and that's why 1984 is so important to people. Is there's just ideas in 1984 that are valid today.
Yeah.
More valid today, some of them.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. Oh, like the controversy over drones is never going to be over. In fact, we're on our way to a new controversy on drones, which is the tiny ones, the small ones that are now.
That's what I thought you were talking about in the first place.
No, I meant like predator drones.
Mm-hmm.
That was a real point of contention for a lot of those, like the political, the people who make fun of politicians and presidents and stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like John Oliver, and I'm sure Jon Stewart had a point on it as well, where it's a big controversy of this like not mindless, but a faceless being that just rains fire from the sky. And now it's like, oh, I just can't imagine why anyone from that country would have a problem with ours. Like children are growing up in a place where rockets come out of nowhere and blow shit up for no reason, and there's no explanation.
Yeah.
And then soldiers come in and they say, we're here to keep the peace.
Yeah.
And from their perspective, there was relative peace, and then you showed up to keep the peace, and now there's bombs.
Yeah, well, I heard Gad Saad talking to Joe Rogan.
Yeah.
And Gad Saad was talking about Omar Khadr, who was, I don't remember exactly what the story was, but essentially Omar Khadr was the son of an Al-Qaeda member, a very high-ranking Al-Qaeda member. And in being captured, he had killed a Canadian soldier, I believe, or an American soldier, a couple. So he was interned in Guantanamo Bay and interrogated at 15, and then was eventually sent to Canada and released. So he sued the Canadian government and was rewarded $10.5 million.
Oh, shit.
So yeah, it's quite the roller coaster of a story. Just dropped.
15.
So the one person was saying that it seems ridiculous that we're spending $10 million worth of taxpayer money to this person.
Right.
But then the other person was saying, yeah, but imagine you're 15 years old. Yeah. Your dad tells you that if we want to protect our home and country, this is what we have to do. Yes. And then these dudes just show up and start shooting at you. Yeah. What are you going to do?
You're going to believe that shit.
And yeah, it's one of those weird things because I get everyone's hesitation at just forking over millions of dollars to someone for being wronged. So I get that part. But at the same time, every official apology is always associated with giving money to people.
Yeah.
Right? Like there's never a time nowadays where you can apologize and not have to give reparations for that. And that's part of the problem. Like everyone agrees that it's wrong, but no one agrees you should get money. And it's like, how do you do one without the other?
Yeah.
Because the government can't give an official apology and just be like, we're terribly sorry.
Yeah.
The way a government apologizes is by restitution.
Yep.
How do you restore someone's life? You don't. How do you send them back to being a 15-year-old kid?
No, you can't.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting the way that it's easy to label a terrorist when they look a certain way and they act a certain way and they speak a certain language. But when a guy shoots some place up over an idea, the term terrorist doesn't come up because he's white, even though it's the same. That's the point of terrorism.
It's to inspire terror.
It's to use to quote Protest the Hero, violence or threat of violence to obtain goals that are political or ideological.
Interesting. Is that what terror is?
Yeah, that's what it was defined at, like way back in like
2001.
Yeah,
I think.
So to obtain goals that are ideological. Oh no, it was religious, ideological, or political. So
and those things are all very similar.
So if you annexed a country for the purpose of conquering, that's not terrorism. You might use terror in the situation, but the intent isn't to obtain a political, religious, or ideological goal. It's a conquest.
But if you sent people ahead
Right.
to destabilize the region by committing acts of terror,
Then it would be.
terrorism.
Because the objective is
political.
to scare the people, which in its own right is an idea. So I suppose you can attach terrorism to all wars, because like we were making
A little bit.
like someone was saying the other day to me about, there was like a statistic on how many bullets are fired in a modern war and how many people die, and it's essentially a person's body weight in bullets before anyone dies, because in modern war we have the ammunition, so there is always rounds going down the line. Even if you don't know where they are, it's just to keep them from poking their heads up. That in itself is terrorism. The intention is to keep them from looking up.
That's a weird point when you make it out like that. But back in the 1800s, you took a shot because you could see a guy, and you were trying to kill him.
Yes.
But nowadays, you take a shot. Like they're in the Battle of Vimy Ridge, the Canadian soldiers used 100 tons of ammunition. They had, I forget how many it was. I think it was like almost 13 machine gun posts. And all of them fired constantly for a period of many hours. I believe it was almost a day, if not longer. But imagine just sitting there, many guns. So like, let's say, just to be conservative, 10 guns.
Yeah.
All just up at a ridgeline. Imagine being up in that ridgeline. You could hear the impact of all these bullets, one after another, from 10 different weapons, and the dust cloud up in the air of all these bullets hitting this dirt and just churning it up. And none of those bullets hit people. Like, for the most part, none of them hit anyone. They were to make the people inside afraid to poke their head out, like you were saying.
Have you listened to Dan Carlin's Hardcore History on World War I?
No, not at all.
It's fantastic. It's extremely long. It's like, 12 hours or more than that. That's where warfare changed, was World War I. It went from a legitimate conquest and a battle of strength and strategy to win at all cost, which often meant fear tactics, playing dirty with chemicals and things like that. So in World War I forget which side it was. I think it was the French. I'm confusing I forget. But one side went at Germany, dressed the way that old warfare went. Bright white gloves.
The French did.
Red clothing and everything like that. Big fancy hats, and they marched in like in rows. Germany was not interested in old warfare. They were one of the first to use camouflage, correct, like practical helmets. They did everything
geniuses
because they understood that no one was ready for new warfare. They were going to reinvent this warfare right now. And then once they figured it out, both sides started to adapt. But in the first month, 40,000 artillery shells were fired.
Whoa.
They were almost out. And that was like years of buildup from the last fight that they had.
Jesus.
Because no one expected the fight to last that long. They didn't expect it to go for was it 4 years?
Yeah, 4 years.
So they had to calm the fuck down because they were shooting artillery shells to scare people.
Oh, so after a while they needed to make sure they hit their targets.
Yeah, it became about that.
That reminds me of the scene in Call of Duty World at War, where you're sitting in a pit and you're grabbing mortar shells and you're just hitting them off a steel plate and then throwing them at people. It's so belligerent.
Yeah.
But it would work, right? Because a mortar just explodes on impact.
Yeah.
So it's like a grenade that just goes off.
I do want to say on an earlier point that I had about like how somebody perceives the predator drone thing. I'm not going to pretend to understand current wars. I'm not going to go into like the political, like why are we there and all that bullshit. My point here is simply consider someone's perspective and how they would think if they didn't have our access to television, if they didn't see the side of the Western world where The majority of us are just hanging out, having fun. We don't even see the bullshit that these people are put through.
Well,
so,
just imagine Winston.
yeah.
You just got rocket bombs that just come out of fucking nowhere.
Yeah.
You don't know how to predict them. You don't even know where they're coming from. But it's happening. And the fact that you don't know why it's happening makes it worse because it generates this super uneasy feeling that you just need a place to direct. You need to just say, fuck those Americans.
Yeah.
Or fuck those gods, if that's what you're assuming, and that, the gods are raining hell down on you. But it's a very... People get very freaked out when they don't know what's going on. Uncertainty is really bad for people, especially in groups.
Yeah.
In groups, it's what leads to things like violence.
Well, it's a cycle. I actually have heard people that I know who believe certain cultures are just terrorists. And it's scary to see someone who's like from Canada who believes that bullshit, because that's not our stereotype. It's like we're all just like...
Supposed to be happy,
come on over, eh?
Yeah.
Grab a slice of bacon. There's no reason to fight. Like, there's shitty people all over the place. And that, believing someone's a terrorist and then treating them like that increases their likeliness of acting in that way.
Yeah, there's a weird thing with Canada that we seem to be very... overreactive to certain things, like, because you talk about how we're like oh yeah, like that's great, yeah, come on over, and join us, and then but sometimes we let it get too far. Sometimes we don't go, hey, listen, buddy, you can't smoke and put cigarettes out on my couch, like sometimes things are happening and we're too nice to say anything about it. And I think those are complaints like those weren't even an issue 20 years ago.
Yep.
Right? That's only an issue nowadays that started to occur. But I agree that it's hard when someone has taken nothing away from the past 15 years of political correctness. I'm not saying political correctness is the way to be, and I'm not saying...
I think it's an oxymoron.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Because political is all about what it looks like and not what it is.
Yeah. But I just think that it's surprising that some people have taken nothing away from it, because there's great parts about political correctness. Like, maybe when someone has autism, you shouldn't call them a retard.
Yeah.
That's kind of insensitive, right?
Michael Scott says it perfectly. You call one of your friends a retard when he does something retarded, but you don't tell an actual developmentally handled person a retard.
Yeah.
It's like the two different things where you're calling one person something as a joke, and you're calling someone else like an actually insensitive thing in the context. Exactly.
It's the same way you could refer, like, if you walked up to your buddy and you said, how's it going, slut? You just laughed. But if I walked up to my girlfriend and said that, it would be very different.
Dude, Dana and I call each other dickhead. It's totally normal.
Yeah. We used to have hilarious names for each other in university.
Yeah.
And it's all a matter of endearment, and that's where intent comes in.
Yes.
But that's why it's so hard, because people will jump on you for the word, and then you don't want to use the word, and then by not using the word, you build it up.
Yes.
Right?
Absolutely.
People just want to jump on your face all the time. They just want to be like, you did this, and that's why you're wrong.
I got a friend who uses problematic as just meaning like what it means. Like, it's a problem. It's a big problem. So he's like, oh, problematic. And every time I'm like, yeah. I mean, like, someone's used that in a different context, but I mean, whatever. There's some words that are the same word, and you can use it in 3 different times, and it's actually completely different every time.
It's the whole point of Newspeak.
Some words are spelled the same. Live and live.
Yeah, those ones screw with
things like that.
One that always gets me is sweat. Every time I read it as sweet.
Yeah.
But that's gross.
It is gross.
Right? That association is there.
Sweet sweat.
Sweet sweat. Oh, sweet and salty sweat.
A new fragrance.
Oh, fuck. It's not.
By, I don't know, Brad Pitt.
Sweetie sweat.
If someone has sweet sweat, it's Brad Pitt.
Oh, God. There's some people that don't sweat.
Yes.
Or, sorry. There's some people that don't generate body odor.
Yes.
And you know...
Part of that, though, is diet.
A little, but there's actually a gene for it. There's
Really?
certain, yeah. So in regular societies, it's a very tiny percentage.
Huh.
It's a couple of percentage of people who don't produce whatever it is that creates that smell, that body odor smell.
Yeah.
But what's really crazy is that 99% of South Koreans have that gene.
Really?
Yeah. So if you go to
Why?
South Korea, I don't know. It's a genetic thing, man.
Why South?
Well, I assume North Korea is probably the same, but I don't think they do much testing.
I was
on
just
those
about to say,
people.
it's probably because we don't have information.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like people just go in there and be like, hey, can we take a genetic biopsy test on a bunch of people? And they'd be like, yeah, do you want to get shot with an anti-air gun? Right? Like, you don't do tests there. You don't have Dennis Rodman going in and coming out with data on the people.
But I want to clarify.
I was going to say, you're going to clarify something else.
You could tell.
I can see it in your
Actually,
eyes.
it's the same thing. I don't want to be misunderstood with, like, I don't want to make it sound like I'm saying, as long as you believe something, it's okay to go along with it. What I want from people in general is to understand it. You don't have to say it's okay. I understand a lot of really fucked up ways of thinking because I get people. It doesn't mean I think that way. It doesn't mean I agree with it. But it's kind of like when you have like when there's a mass shooting, there's always that one person who's like, what a piece of shit. I can't believe he did this. Every time there's a celebrity suicide, someone always has some shitty way of like, like I'm not even going to say it, but some
They deserve it.
Okay, fine, I guess I will say it. There's always one person who will say the word coward. There's always someone who will say like,
when they commit suicide?
I can't believe he did this to that person. Doesn't he know that he has a family? Yes, he knows he has a family.
And believe you, it tore him up.
Oh, fuck yeah.
At the end.
Like when Robin Williams died, I heard the shittiest stuff from people.
Really?
Oh yeah, fuck yeah.
Who are these shitty people that you know?
I work in minimum wage food service, all right? You're always going to meet those people who have no fucking perspective. You don't have to agree with it by understanding it. It's kind of like when someone gets misunderstood by speaking positively of Hitler's ability, and someone's like, you can't talk about it. It's like, if we ignore information by saying, no, he was an idiot. Like, okay, fine. So the second greatest war in the world happened by sheer stupidity and luck? No, actually, it was a plan.
Pretty sure that is the Great War.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure World War II is the Great War.
Well, the first one was...
Wasn't it?
No, they
was the first one the Great War?
The first one was called the Great War.
Oh, okay.
Because of its impact on the world. And I don't think they called it a world war until the second one.
And then they saw the trend.
Yeah.
No, why don't we just call those Germany's wars?
They were both Germany.
Because they were both the wars where the world went, we need to stop Germany.
Well, you were telling me that...
They're so powerful and different.
It was more like World War I Part 2. Because the Second World War
was caused
by the
sanctions.
The sanctions and the reparations. It was like it caused
the same. Sorry.
Oh, okay.
Reparations.
It caused a was it a depression?
Yeah. Huge economic depression.
Yeah, in Germany.
That's why there was so much hatred of Jewish communities, because Jewish communities were independently wealthy, and most of them remained wealthy through the Depression because they're really good with their money and they support each other.
So they were seen as an ally of the Western world.
Not as much as they were seen as being non-German, because they weren't supporting the rest of the society. Not that they should, but they were the only prosperous ones. Right? So that just led to resentment. The same way everybody resents people that have more than them.
Fuck yeah.
I just wanted to say, we're mostly done with 1984, so if you were only here for the 1984,
no, dude,
this is our shooting the shit portion.
This is the first...
the debrief.
It's the first discussion where we've gone for a very long time afterwards. I think it's important to discuss themes
from the book.
In the past, we've kind of just been like, all right, well, Animal Farm ended that way. Have a good one.
Well, Animal Farm was so depressing at the end.
It is, yeah.
Because we got to the end and I was like, yeah. Okay, thank you for... Right? I feel like this one, even though it ends sort of depressingly, there's so much that you can glean from this story about...
Yeah, but, sorry.
I think, yeah.
Back from what you said there about people having a problem with people who make money.
Yeah.
It happens with YouTubers.
Yes.
Like, all you do is this, and you make money. I've heard people say, like, rappers nowadays just mumble and make $1 million. And I'm like, so why are you working here?
Yeah. People also hate government workers sometimes.
Yeah.
All you do is sit in your truck and you make X amount of money an
Right.
hour. People,
And then even with Robin Williams, people are like, what has he got to be depressed about? He has all that money. That is not the world. That's the thing, though. When you don't have money, money is the world. It's the thing you're going after. But once you get it, you just move on to the next thing. You don't just sit there satisfied for
With the
40
money.
years.
we're not all Scrooge McDuck.
No.
We're not going to swim around in it.
Plus, like, I end up with like a little bit of money at the end of each month after expenses. I don't have a huge amount, but I'm happy because we're doing what we want to do here. Without this, if I were to trade what we do here
For more money.
for just not having to work, I would also have nothing to do without work, and there'd just be nothing. I would have to
you
search.
would get depressed really quickly.
Yeah, I'd have to find something that I enjoy. Like
And you would end up back here.
look at fucking Joss Whedon. Who was that guy that was just on Joe? Apatow, Judd Apatow. Look at Brad Pitt, Tom Cruise, all these people who have made fuck you money a decade ago, but they're still doing
do it.
shit. Why? Because they love it. And you figure out people like, Frankie Muniz. He made a shit ton of money when he was like 21. He retired with like tens of millions in the bank. And now he does what he wants, which is I think he's in a band and he manages it or something like that. But he doesn't he doesn't just say, well, you know what, I was an actor when I was a kid, so I guess I'll keep acting.
He does what he wants.
He retired from acting and did what he wanted to do.
And you know what? Maybe some people even did that same path. They hated acting, but they did it to make money, and then they moved on to whatever they wanted to do.
Josh Brolin. No, is that his name?
Yeah, from No Country for Old Men.
No, he's still acting.
That's Josh Brolin.
Josh Hartnett from Slevin.
Yeah. He stopped acting?
He killed it for a very short amount of time, and then he kind of walked away. I think
Okay, I'm really glad. I thought you were going to say he killed himself, and I was
No,
like,
no.
all these fucking actors!
I wouldn't say it like that.
Yeah, that's why I was going to be kind of caught off guard. Okay.
I think he might have done something recently, but he's like, he didn't want to play the game. People wanted him to like do, hey, we'd love to see you in this, and he's like, I don't want to do it. And he did that to enough people that most of like the big groups weren't interested in anymore, and he said, okay, fine.
Perfect.
I've made enough money. I don't need you.
Well, you know what? It's good that he was at a position where he had the fuck you money to just move forward. I've been thinking about work a lot, and I think that the story actually is very appropriate because of the way work happens in this story.
Mm-hmm.
The proles don't work. So they spend all their time either trying to find food or trying to do whatever, just waste time, essentially. Go and get some of the prole porno. But the party members all work these insane hours doing shit they don't want to do.
Yeah.
Right? And that's the grind. Literally a grind. It wears you down. Like someone taking your face and pushing it against the ground as you drive away. Like
That's their intention too, is to always do that. Always to make sure that no one's enjoying themselves. Even the best people are in squalor.
And the hardest thing is when you go to talk about real jobs with people always get into a really old stance. And I get why that is, because money still has to be a thing, because we still have to be able to converse with each other on a financial level. We need to be able to exchange. But it's just really hard that when you go to talk about things like people having to work less or eliminating jobs like fast food jobs, people always say, what are those people going to do for work? Well, what if the goal is to try and help them find their own work? Frankie Muniz wanted to be in a band. He didn't want to be an actor. Maybe actor is the only role or the only job that exists right now, and we're trying to funnel people into it because we think we need to fill that.
Right.
And I think that is so unfortunate. Like, so next week I'm going to be working 12-hour shifts. And the reason I'm working 12-hour shifts is because I'm working with a subcontractor, and the crew that I'm working with wants to get 12-hour days because they want to make 60 hours a week so that they can bring that money home to their family.
Right.
Whereas I don't have that need. I have much less expenses. I'm at a different phase in my life. So personally, I'd like to work less, but I would be standing in the way of them making their living.
Yes.
And it's so unfortunate that they feel it's necessary to work for 60 hours out of 168 hours a week. You're going to work for 60 of them. Let's round up to 68 when you count driving to and from and all that jazz. So you have 100 hours left. you're going to sleep 8 hours a day, let's say ideally.
Shit.
That's 25. So you've got 75 hours left. Now start chunking that into eating and showering every day. You're getting down into like 20 hours a week that you actually have to do whatever you want to do.
And
throw kids into that, and you're making their lunches, and then next thing you know, you watch Game of Thrones on Monday night, and you restart the whole fucking process.
Yeah.
And the thing is, it's not just them. It's not just me. It's not just you. Everyone does this. The only people who don't do this are those who truly found their passion. Some people are in industries they love. Some people do research that they couldn't go without. And you know what? Some people love, like, my subcontractors are drillers. Some people love doing that shit. Yeah. Working outdoors, you get sun, you get to do physical work. But for the most part, people slog their way through work so that they can get to life. Work isn't even a part of life anymore. It's become a separate thing. And this is a world, 1984, where there is no life. There's just work.
Yeah.
And I think that
it's very intentional.
Some people spend weeks at a time doing that. I know people who will work 6 days a week because people always want them on Saturdays.
Yep.
And that means Sunday is basically make your lunch, relax, and then go back to work Monday.
Yep.
So imagine the angst those people go through. Imagine how much stress Winston is under. And imagine that these people have that same stress minus they're not going to get arrested. They're in fact just going to continue to be miserable. In some ways, that's worse when you think about Winston talking about waiting for the bullet, right?
Yeah.
It's because he wants that meaningless to end.
Oh, I know the feeling of being like on edge when you think something's about to happen. Like there was a point months ago where I almost moved out of this place because the people upstairs were so fucking loud. I'm talking like sounds all the time at random intervals. With no fucking, like...
So, like, they had one of those birds that keeps dipping into the cup, but it just smashed the floor every time?
I think it was a kid running around and stomping on things and, like, jumping onto his bed and jumping off of his bed and shit like that. So, like, right now, I know that they vacuum once a week. And I can hear it, and it sounds like a vacuum, and I understand that there's a certain amount of time before it's over. And I can expect that.
It's like cutting your lawn.
Yeah.
You hear the lawnmower.
Yeah.
You know they got to cut it, and then the lawnmower is going to stop.
But... during that like month, I was like stressed out over nothing because I was always just kind of being like hit in the head. That's what it felt like. Someone just kind of like flicking me.
Light sounds.
And the first time it's like fuck off, but at the end it's like, oh fuck.
Yeah.
Like clenching your fist like fuck you.
I'm gonna come up there and burn your apartment down even though it's connected to mine.
Like I'm gonna be like,
house.
Hey, excuse me, did you know you live above somebody? Like,
dude, you got to get a broom and pull the old man.
There was a couple times where I was almost just gonna like bang on like this, like just like, hey, I can hear you. Stop it.
Yeah, it's too bad you can't make noise that would affect the person above you, right? Because that just isn't a possibility.
Yeah.
For the most part. And I think that some living environments can be even worse than working environments.
They can be.
Right? So I saw these pictures of people living in Hong Kong.
Yeah.
And they're essentially living in a storage locker.
That's brutal.
It's just long enough to lie down. It's not big enough to stand in. It's big enough to put a TV in. It would be equivalent to a bunk in a tour bus.
Ooh.
And that's their house. That is their actual living space. People have like shit hung up in there.
Wow.
Yeah, so you start to imagine that even though there are better and worse environments here, like there's some places where your living standard is non-existent in some ways.
Yeah.
And that is why poverty is such a terrifying thing.
Yep.
Because here we have people who live on the streets and we do our best to take care of them. But you imagine that there's some cities where most people live on the street. You think about some places in India where they go to their quote-unquote homes, which have, I mean, obviously you don't need the same type of protection from the elements, but they're not insulated, they're not sealed.
Yeah.
Bugs, which are also insects, bugs, rats, birds, shit just get in your house, and that's where you go home to.
Yeah.
So it's just kind of unique that even in our world, these things exist. These proles that live under constant fear and constant squalor, the regular outer party that's just the drones. I consider myself a drone because I work in an industry where we do pre-feasibility development for putting up houses. So,
Yeah.
I have a hand. I am a tiny cog in a big machine
Yep.
that churns the earth into concrete blocks that we can live in.
Yeah.
Right? So in a way, I'm very much a part of the machine. Just a tiny little piece of it.
I think it's interesting because we're talking about things you don't want to say because of their like preconception, that kind of thing, or things that you're afraid of talking about. Since I brought up terrorism and predator drones, I have not stopped thinking about whether I have fully
explained
myself and am not going to be misunderstood. And I think that's an important thing to mention. I think that's actually what's going to make me feel better about it, is mentioning that every other thing I've said that could be misconstrued easily, that's the one that stands out to me. I wouldn't want people to think that I am sympathizing with like the people that we label as this and that. And I think that's an important part of this story, is that that perspective is so important. And that when you are stuck in a situation and you have never seen anything else, and all you have seen is aggression from a group, it's easy for you to only have aggression towards another group.
Mm-hmm.
I think Jim Jeffries said it really well, that he was talking about numbers of American and Canadian citizens being recruited to terrorist organizations on a daily basis. And he said, imagine coming to a country and you're finally free and you are still treated as though you are a terrorist. How easy is it going to be to take a 15-year-old kid and turn them to your side if they already believe they're part of your side?
Yeah, and if they feel like they don't have a home elsewhere.
That's part of his point, is that it's part of that cycle thing, that if every time you see a police officer you say something negative, every time that police officer comes around they expect something negative, so they act a little more aggressive. And now a new person who has never had an experience now has an aggressive experience, and now they say something to a police officer, and it just keeps going and
cycles
going.
Itself.
Racism, same thing. It just keeps going around and around and around.
Yeah, and like what I was saying about the way our country operates, we tend to have a very liberal government which behaves in a way that even when we have a conservative government,
yes,
our government behaves in a way that is very progressive.
Almost in some cases a little aggressively progressive.
Yes.
Aggressive progression.
I have heard...
I should run the next election.
So there was the one story of the guy who got in some sort of a verbal altercation with a couple of lesbians.
Yes.
At a nightclub, and then...
A comedian,
yeah. was successfully sued for like $15,000 or something like that. Yeah, and then something else also occurred. Joe Rogan said he's not going to come back to Canada right now.
Really?
Yeah, because he doesn't really know what's going on. Like at this point, it's all up in the air. What we're doing, and let's face it, the current Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau, is way more progressive than any other person who's ever sat in his seat before. So now is a very unsure time for North America. Period.
Yeah.
Right. Like if you want to think about any 5-year interval going backwards, everything was normal.
Relatively.
Normal guy here, normal guy there.
Yeah.
Slightly weird guy here, slightly weird guy there. Like we had John Chrétien, which is a strange man.
Yeah.
But he's a politician, and he's an old school politician.
It was expectation. It was just like, here we go. Like it's like, surprise, surprise. We replaced the old one with basically the same guy. But
exactly, everything was status quo, even though the status quo wasn't good.
Yeah.
Right now, we're in a transitionary period where things could go really well or really poorly.
They could.
And I feel like it's a strange time to be, because you don't even know, we're posting this on YouTube, but does that mean it's subject to Canadian law?
That's the tough thing.
Right? Where does that fall? Who regulates us? Because we're releasing it in Canada, we're Canadian citizens, but we're releasing it to the world on a global platform. And I just think that every little thing the government does is important. Yeah. Everything that every government does is important. And even though some things will seem inconsequential, if you were to have an accurate retelling of how the party came to be in 1984, like I think that would be a fascinating follow-up book. If he wrote the quote-unquote true history of the party,
right,
which would be ironic, obviously, because
Right.
you would have to question the true history itself.
The true truth.
But if you were to follow that, you would see all these little things the same way you did in Animal Farm. All these little tiny rules. Thou shalt not drink alcohol to excess.
Yeah.
All these little, just minute changes that don't seem to affect the fabric of the world, but eventually lead to this cage, this invisible cage. Like
Yeah.
Morpheus says in The Matrix. I love bringing this back to The Matrix. He says, it is a prison you cannot see or smell or feel or touch.
Ooh.
And that is what 1984 is.
It is a prison.
Even though you can see the telescreens on the walls, even though you can feel the grime around you, you can't even tell that you're in prison, but you are at every second of every day.
Yep.
It's dark. And I'm glad that everyone followed us into the darkness because, well, you know, when we talk about these things, it does sometimes get really heavy, and I like it to still be fun. So I'm
Yeah.
glad that we've still found some enjoyment out of Winston's horrendous suffering
Yeah.
and endless pain.
Do you have a line on your potential next book?
Yeah, so I was originally thinking of doing the Lorax,
Oh.
and I may still do that, but I don't know if there's going to be that much to actually bite into on that
That's
one.
fine.
So we'll see. Potentially the Lorax, and then the next song that I'll be doing is Paint It Black by the Rolling Stones.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Oh, I
I'm
love it.
excited for that one. Yeah. So something is coming along. Something is definitely in the works. But until then, thank you for joining us
Yeah.
on our 1984 discussion, and we'll be back next time.
All right.
Yeah, bro.
Yeah.
We did it.
Hey.
So long.